Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to take a moment and thank everyone for joining us for our presentation sponsored by the Ferris Women's Network. My name is Karen Green Bay, and I'm the program coordinator for the Ferris Women's Network. And we have our president joining us as well. Thank you, Jody, for participating, joining us, and all the leadership that you provide for the Ferris Women's Network. Well, today we have a special treat brought to you by Spectrum Health of Big Rapids and Reed City. I'd like to thank Danielle and Baily for the information and the valuable information they will be sharing regarding a tour. Actually, they're having a tour at Meyer. Are you at Meyer? Is that correct? And they would do a store tour and talk about label investigations. So if there are any questions, if you could put the questions in the chat box, and Danielle will address those questions later. But I would like to turn it over now to Danielle Wells and her staff. Thank you, Danielle.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having us. This is a little new for us, going virtual with the phone, so bear with us. Couple things is if you put your questions in the chat, I'll try to pop those up. I can't, unfortunately, view the screen and the chat at the same time, so raise your hand too, and I can address those. And then there might be times where the camera might, go to the floor, and that's just so that I can give other shoppers privacy, and we don't really want other people in the background for this. So again, Thank you. I'm going to introduce Baily Parmelee. She is a dietitian for Spectrum Health Big Rapids and Reed City Hospital. She's been with us for about 2.5 years, and I'll turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Hello. So weird talking with this mask on, but anyways, I'm Baily, like Danielle said. Yeah, I'm a dietitian for Spectrum Health in Reed City and Big Rapids hospitals. So I kind of wear a number of hats. I work a little bit in long-term care. This obviously is like my community piece that I do. I do some inpatient and outpatient work too. So kind of hop around. I like it. But yeah, so if you guys have questions throughout the program, just feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat and we'll get those addressed.
All right, well, let's get started with the produce area. What do you have to say about the world of colors here?
Right, I was going to say, I don't know how much you guys can see behind me, obviously, with the produce, but when it comes to our produce, the most important thing is, have you ever heard the term of eating the rainbow? So we want to choose a variety of fruits and vegetables. So really, you're getting different nutrients from all those fruits and vegetables, which is why it's important to choose as many of those as you can and incorporate those into your diet. I mean, really, when it comes to washing your fruits and vegetables, I know a lot of people like the vegetable washes. I just kind of caution when you use those to look at the ingredient label on there to figure out what exactly is in that vegetable wash that you're washing your fruits and vegetables with. And honestly, personally, I just rinse mine with tap water. If you're worried about the quality of your tap water, you can just use like distilled water, and that actually cleans off 98% of the bacteria that you find on like outside of your produce. So and if you want to make like a homemade vegetable wash, you can do that with just vinegar and water. It's 1 part vinegar to 3 parts water. And the only downfall with that is that sometimes it makes your produce taste like vinegar. So I would just use cold water, but it's up to you. All right. Any questions with the produce section or?
We just had a cabbage down. All right, well, let's head over to the meat. Yep. Not too much label reading in the produce section.
Yeah, not really.
They're whole foods.
All right, so we're over here in the meat section. Obviously, there's lots of choices. So when we're choosing like our beef and our pork, if we can try to choose, well, really any meat, when we can try to choose the most lean option, so like 90-10, where it's 90% and only 10% fat or less, that's going to be our best option, just because that's going to help decrease the saturated fat content of the meat. Another thing you can do when you're like, let's say you're making ground beef for tacos or something. After you fry up your ground beef and you strain all the fat off of it, you can actually rinse it with hot water, and that will help also get rid of some of that excess fat. So I guess we can just compare a couple likeness here. All right, so this would be like an 85% lean, 15% fat, versus right here's our 90% lean, 10% fat. So obviously this one would be the healthier option if we were trying to choose, right? Another thing you want to look for is like with our, like choosing options like that say loin or round in them. So like a pork loin or ground round, that's going to be a healthier cut of the meat. Another option, you know, to switch it up so we're not having red meat too often throughout the week, we can use like a ground turkey in place of the ground beef. Oh no, you're fine. So over here, when we're looking at that ground turkey, the turkey's going to be, you know, naturally leaner than the beef, but we still want to look at that percentages. So choosing like a 93.7, or even, you know, if you can tolerate it, the 99.1. Personally, I've tried to make tacos with both of these types of turkey here, and I didn't really like it with the 99.1. That was too lean for me. I needed the 93.7, so it gave it a little extra fat and flavor. But another thing we want to try to look for is when we're looking at these, getting the versions that aren't already seasoned or salted for us. So like here, season and salt your meat yourself, so that way you can control how much salt or what seasonings you're putting in it, basically. Other things for meat are just going to be kind of, you know, avoiding those highly processed, high-fat meats like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, smoked sausage, those types of things, which I think we all kind of already know that, but yeah, I think that's about it for the meat. Yeah, we'll head over to the frozen foods. All right, so here's a good stop would be the frozen potato section, right? I mean, when you're looking at the potatoes, obviously just choosing the potato in its most natural form is probably going to be the healthiest for you. So instead of choosing like a zesty curly fry down here where it's already seasoned and battered, maybe choosing something like our shredded hash browns, or even the Southern style hash browns. And if you look at the label, and you look down at like the ingredients, you can see, you know, exactly what's in there. So if these are potatoes, we want that first ingredient to be potatoes, right? The less ingredients, the less processed typically the food is. Whereas then if we look at our onion rings here, we can see how many more ingredients there are on there. So more processed than our diced potato. I don't know how many of you guys eat frozen meals, but the main thing we want to look for when we're eating frozen meals is that sodium content. Usually that's pretty high in most of our frozen meals. So for the average adult, the recommended amount of sodium per day is going to be no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So what that equates to in table salt is 1 teaspoon. So nothing. So basically, get rid of your salt shakers, what they're trying to tell us. But if we just compare a couple of these frozen meals here, so let's just take a Hungry Man dinner, for example. You got a Salisbury steak with some mashed potatoes. We look at the nutrition label here. for one package. So for this container, we look at our sodium, we're getting 1,630 milligrams of sodium. So that's, you know, pretty close to the 2,300 we get for the day. And that's just with one meal, right? So I guess we can look at a healthier option maybe when it comes to those. Here's just one example, and I'm sure there's other better examples than the Hungry Man dinner, but this is just one of those. So this is a Healthy Choice Power Bowl. We look at this one, we see sodium for this meal is 600 milligrams. So when people are picking out frozen meals, I usually say if we can try to stay between, you know, 400 and 500 calories, which this one is 210, that's pretty low. And then for sodium, if we can try to stick around the 600 or less, that's going to be a good starting point for you. All right, let's keep moving.
Oh, we got to bypass all the candy.
Next stop is the salty snack. All right. So obviously, I think most of us can agree that, you know, our chips, our salty snacks, our cookies, those types of things are pretty low in nutrients, you know, higher in calories, sodium, fat, those types of things. But if, you know, everything is fine to have in moderation, right? It's how much of it are we eating and how often are we eating it? So something to pay attention to. If you had to choose out of these chips and these type of snacks, you know, maybe choosing like a lightly salted tortilla chip or pretzel, chips and salsa or chips and hummus, something like that. And then another good one, good snack to have is like nuts or trail mix. So we've got a few different types of cashews up here. So we've got an unsalted version versus our lightly salted, and then our fully salted, I guess you'd say. So when we look at those, we look at the label on them, we can see the difference in the sodium. So our unsalted ones obviously have 0 milligrams of sodium per serving. Our lightly salted are going to be 50 milligrams, and then our regular ones are going to be 100 milligrams, right? So best option, the unsalted, but still it's okay to have the salted, right? The one thing I like to point out with our nuts though, especially, is they're good sources of protein, and they're, you know, they're healthy fats for us, but they do have a lot of calories in a small amount. So a serving of nuts is about a quarter cup. So that's really not much at all. And a 40 calories. So pretty easy to overdo it on the calories if we're not paying attention to that portion size of those nuts, right? So just something to pay attention to when you're eating nuts, you know, portion them out before, don't eat them out of the container. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Our next stop is at the
Oils.
oil.
Yep. Cooking oils.
It was this one. All right. So a big one, obviously, when we're cooking or baking, maybe, is our oils. So there's tons of types of oils, right? Well, how do we know which ones are good and which ones are bad? So you want to try to choose, most of the time, we want to try to choose the ones that are predominantly monounsaturated fats, because those are the fats that are good. They're going to help our cholesterol, our good cholesterol, and lower our bad cholesterol. So a few of those options are going to be canola oil, olive oil, and avocado oil. all three of those are good. Canola oil is probably the cheapest one, so you know I tend to gravitate towards that one because I'm cheapskate. But and then we've got the olive oil, and you'll see on this one it says classic olive oil versus let's see, where's the other one?
Like an extra virgin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have like other types of olive oil, like an extra virgin olive oil. So your extra virgin olive oil is going to be, it's going to be more expensive. So I would say if you're going to make like a dip, like, you know, some type of dip to dip your bread in, or you're going to use it for a base of a dressing on your salad or something like that, trying to use the extra virgin olive oil just because it's probably going to taste better. But if we're cooking, you know, if you're adding olive oil in place of like a vegetable oil or something that you're baking, then just going with the classic olive oil because it doesn't really matter and it's cheaper. So save you some money. Avocado oil, that one's good for cooking or pan frying. The good one about that is that you can heat it to a higher temp without it burning than like our olive oil and our canola oils. So those are the ones we're going to choose most often. The ones that I'm going to say choose sometimes, so these necessarily aren't, they're not unhealthy for us, but the reason we say choose sometimes is because a lot of our processed foods are made with these types of oils. So like corn oil, vegetable oil, sunflower, safflower, sea salt, sesame oil, soybean oil. A lot of our processed foods are made with those oils. So most of us, if we're eating processed foods, we're already getting a lot of these in our diet. So that's why we try to say, go for the canola or the olive oil or the avocado instead. The one that I think kind of tricks a lot of people is coconut oil, because I know that's kind of a bad diet thing. But the problem with coconut oil is that majority of the fat we find in coconut oil is actually from saturated fat. And saturated fat is one of those fats we're trying to kind of limit and avoid in our diet. So if we just kind of compare a couple of these, so for 1 tablespoon of coconut oil, you'll see there's total fat 14 grams. And of those 14 grams, 12 of them are coming from saturated fat. So again, majority of the fat in coconut oil is that saturated or that unhealthy fat. Versus when we look at, let's say, our olive oil, 1 tablespoon of olive oil has total 14 grams of fat, but only 2 of those 14 are coming from saturated fat. So that's why it's a healthier option.
Same amount of calories too.
Right, same amount of calories, but yeah, it's just that fat difference there. Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to point out in like our fruit section, so when we're eating fruits and vegetables, obviously it doesn't matter if it's fresh, frozen, or canned. They're all healthy, they're all good for us, right? When we're choosing like our canned fruits or like our little fruit cups, we just want to make sure we're choosing the versions that are in 100% juice versus one that's in, like this one's in a heavy syrup or a light syrup. We just want to choose those ones that are in 100% juice, because when we look at the back here at the nutrition label, you'll see there are more calories when they're in that heavy syrup, right? And then we've got our total sugars over here are 20. And of those 20 grams of sugar, there's 13 added in the heavy juice or in the heavy syrup. Whereas compared with the juice, we've got less calories per half cup. We've got less total sugars, and then we've got 0 added sugar. So we know that those 11 grams of sugar are coming right from our fruit in there, right? They're not added. So just a way to help cut down on some added sugars and calories and that kind of stuff.
Come look at the yogurts.
All right, so now we're in the yogurt section, and I think this is another one because we often, a lot of times we think most yogurts are, oh, it's yogurt, it's healthy, right? It's got to be healthy for us. But it's not all yogurts are the same, right? when we're looking at our yogurt, one important thing I like to look for is what type of milk it's made out of, right? So if we can choose a yogurt that's made out of skim milk, preferably, that's going to be our best bet because it's going to have less of that saturated fat. So for example, if we look at these up here, so like this one, you'll see right there, it says milk, 0% fat. Or if you looked at the ingredients, it should say in there too, non-fat milk, right? So that's how we know this one's made with skim milk versus, where's another one?
Right here.
Right here. So on this one, we've got it's made with 2% milk, which still isn't whole milk. But when you compare these, you'll see the difference in the saturated fat content. So in our 2% milk, we've got 1.5 grams of saturated fat versus our skim milk, we've got 0, right? And then it just keeps increasing the higher percentage of milk you go up. So whole milk would be more than that, right? Another thing to point out when we're looking at like our yogurts is going to be, if we can try to avoid the ones like these, even though they're really good, you know, maybe use this as a dessert instead of like your breakfast in the morning, you know, look at it more like a dessert, just because all these extra add-ins, those are going to add calories, they're going to add that. And the last thing I wanted to point out with the yogurts is if you, at least what I do is, instead of using sour cream, when something calls for sour cream, like in a recipe, or maybe it's on top of my baked potato or something, I'll just use plain non-fat Greek yogurt. And the reason I do that is because I think it tastes like sour cream. So just something, if you want to try that, it's always an option. Just one's getting fed. All right.
And then bread was the last one.
Yeah. All right, so you know the bread aisle, that one's always confusing too, just because there's so many to choose from, right? What we got to pay attention to, well, really any aisle, but especially the bread aisle, is their labeling. So let's just use these two for an example. So if we saw this honey wheat here, Sara Lee bread, we might think, oh yeah, that's a whole grain. It says wheat on there, right? Whereas we see this one 100% whole wheat, we can pretty much assume that that one is whole wheat. But the only way to really know is going to be to look at the ingredient label. So I don't know if you can see that one, but on our ingredients right here. So the first ingredient, whole wheat flour, right there. That's what you're looking for. Whole wheat, whole grain, anytime you want to know if something is actually a whole grain, it should have it right in the ingredients list. It should say whole whatever. So in this case, whole wheat flour. So we know that's a whole grain. If we look up here, we'll see dietary fiber, 3 grams. So your whole grain foods are going to have more dietary fiber, which is important for a lot of things. But they're going to have more dietary fiber in them. They're less processed, just more nutrients overall, versus our refined grains. So with our honey wheat, if we look up here at the ingredient label, that first ingredient is enriched wheat flour. So yeah, it does say wheat flour, right? But it says enriched there. So enriched, bleached, if you see those type of words there, fortified, that's how we know that's not a whole grain. And then if we go and look over at our dietary fiber, so for 1 serving of this, it's less than 1 gram, because like I was saying, our refined grains are going to have less nutrients, less fiber, because they're more processed. I think that's it for the bread. All the good stuff over there. Just keep walking when you're in that aisle.
All right. All right. Is there any other questions that anyone might have, or a specific aisle that you guys frequent most when you are in the grocery store that you'd like Baily to go over? Kind of a couple different options. Pasta. Let's head over to the pasta aisle. All right, 9. Yep.
Okay. So with our pasta, obviously there's tons of different types of pasta. Pasta's kind of the same as like with your bread or with your other grains, like your rice. Really, we want to try to choose a whole grain pasta. So let's find a whole grain versus a non-whole grain.
I don't know if I've ever had whole grain. What does it taste like?
So whole grain, I mean, I don't personally mind the taste of it. But I know some people are kind of like, it tastes like too weedy, you know. If that's the case for you, maybe try doing like half and half. That's what.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, use like half whole grain and half regular, because it's not that like the regular spaghetti is bad for you. That's not. But it's just this one's a whole grain, so it's gonna have more nutrients and it's less processed. But so just another thing you can kind of compare. Gluten free. Let's compare one of these. So this would be like a regular spaghetti versus our whole grain spaghetti. So the main differences are going to be that dietary fiber, we've got 2 grams in our regular spaghetti, and then in our whole grain, we've got 7 grams, right? So that's the main difference.
And that's going to keep you fuller longer.
Yes. Yep. That's what one of the good things about fiber is. It helps keep us fuller for longer periods of time. Yep. And among other things, obviously fiber is good for us.
Right. Can you tell us about the alternative pastas? I see like chickpeas and zucchini and
you know, if you like those, by all means eat them. From like a nutritional standpoint, I wouldn't say that they're really significantly better than like a regular pasta or a whole grain pasta, just because the amount of vegetable that those are actually being made out of really isn't giving you a lot of nutrients, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But again, that being said, it's not a bad choice.
Right.
But I don't think that you're doing yourself a lot of favors. Like, you still need those vegetables. You can't replace those vegetables with vegetable based pasta, right?
Let me look at the chat.
Yeah. Was there specific
All right.
questions?
What about selecting and choosing beverages?
Beverages.
Yep.
Yeah.
We can go to that aisle.
Yeah. Should we like the top juice?
Yeah, let's go there.
Juice is 6.
Let's go to juice first and then go over to pop.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to like our juice section, I always tell people, if you're gonna drink juice, we want to make sure it's 100% juice. So for it to count as a fruit serving, it's going to be 4 ounces. 4 ounces of 100% fruit juice will count as 1 fruit serving. And I always tell people, I'd rather you get the nutrients from the fruit itself. So eat the orange instead of drinking the orange juice. But if you like juice, you know, that's okay too. But let's just limit ourselves to a half a cup a day. So let's find one that's like right here, 100% juice, right? So we know that these are 100% juice versus, let's find like a cranberry, right here. So cranberry flavored juice cocktail. If we look in here, again, what we'd be looking for would be those total sugars. So total sugars in 8 ounces is 25 grams.
And 15% juice.
Right. And it's 15%, 20 or 5 of those are natural from the fruit, right? Whereas let's look at this 100% apple juice here. So 120 calories for a cup. We go down to sugar. So yeah, there's still a lot of sugar in here, which is why I was saying we should only be drinking about a half a cup of juice a day. But of those sugars, 0 are added. Those are all coming from our apple itself, right? So that's the main difference between our juices. And like I said before, I'd rather you eat the apple than drink the juice because you're getting a lot more nutrients and fiber from that apple itself than from the juice.
We can head over to the next aisle.
Yeah, we can go over to the pops. Vegetable juice, if anyone drinks vegetable juice, the only thing I say with those is try to pick maybe like a low sodium version just because those tend to be pretty high in sodium. But otherwise, you know, and same idea with those is just going to be, I'd rather you eat the vegetable than drink the vegetable juice. But again, not that it's a bad choice. Let's see. Our teas, got a lot of teas over here. So obviously unsweetened tea, that's going to be your best bet is your unsweetened. You know, if we look at a unsweetened tea versus the same brand but in sweet tea, 0 calories, 100 calories. We've got 27 grams of sugar, 0 grams of sugar, right? I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. So unsweetened beverages.
What's your thoughts on energy drinks? You know, a lot of people take those for like electrolytes and things like that.
Right. So like a Rockstar or something, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or like a Monster. You know, I don't drink energy drinks. I like coffee for the caffeine. But yeah, the main thing I worry about with like the energy drinks is people's heart health. You know, one energy drink a day, I'm not going to say it's good, but I wouldn't like be too harsh on someone that drinks one a day. But some people I know drink like a couple energy drinks a day, and that can really, you know, take effect on like your heart. So I would watch out with the energy drinks. And then you've got all types of different athletic type drinks, right? Again, with these, the main thing I would be looking at probably would just be the added sugars, right? So like this body armor, total sugars 28. Well, of those 28, we've got 26 are added, right? So this is really, it's more of a juice, right? It's this marketing body armor, sport type marketing that makes people think it's good for them, right? And I'm not saying that it doesn't have good things in it, like for example, electrolytes or, you know, B vitamins, but we know that we can get electrolytes, we can get antioxidants and B vitamins from other foods, from healthier sources of food than drinking them from this, right? So that's kind of what I try to point out to people.
Okay. I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the recommended meals per day and when to include snacks in our daily diet? So for example, is eating one large meal in the evening healthy?
Right. So typically we're going to tell people we want you to eat smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day. That's going to be better on our metabolism. So let's say instead of eating like 1 or 2 large meals, if we can eat, say, 3 smaller meals and then maybe incorporate a couple snacks in between, that's typically going to be better because then we're less likely to overeat at those meal times because we haven't waited so long in between meals to eat, right? So we're not as hungry. So yeah, I would say definitely smaller, more frequent meals. A lot of it has to do too with what personally works with your schedule, you know?
Right.
So
how do you tell patients and people that you work with, like how to recognize like natural hunger signs and like when to stop? Like I know it's kind of like recognizing that, but like, how do you get them started on that habit?
Right. So yeah, that kind of goes with like mindful versus mindless eating. So when we want to eat mindfully, that means we're really thinking about why we're hungry. So some of those signs could be maybe your stomach is growling, you know, maybe you're physically feeling kind of weak because you haven't ate in a while, right? Another thing I always tell people is, all right, think about the last time you ate. Was it a half hour ago? If it was a half hour ago, you're probably not actually physically hungry, right? But if it was 4 hours ago, yeah, there's a good chance that you could be hungry, right? A lot of times it's our emotions that cause us to eat. I know personally, like when I get stressed out, that makes me want to just, for some reason, I feel like I can take away that stress if I eat something, right? So I'll eat more when I'm stressed out. But just kind of reminding myself that, okay, why am I feeling like I'm hungry right now? Is it because I'm stressed, or am I actually physically hungry? If it's because I'm stressed, I mean, I've got to address the reason I'm stressed to get that hunger to go away. If I just eat, even though I'm stressed, that's not going to really take care of my hunger. I'm still going to be hungry even after I eat, if that makes sense.
So another question is how to pick out the best canned vegetables.
Canned vegetables, yeah. Let's see,
Aisle 10.
Yeah. So most time with really anything canned, one of the main things we're worried about is, again, that sodium content. There's always a lot of sodium in our canned foods. So when it comes to like our vegetables, especially, I look for the ones that say no salt added. So I'm going to find one of those.
Oh, canned vegetables at the end of the aisle.
Right here. All right. So let's just compare some beets. So we've got the same thing, right? We've got beets, but this one has no salt added, right? So let's compare the back of the labels. So for a half a cup serving, they're both going to have 40 calories. Our no salt added has 15 milligrams of sodium per half cup, whereas our regular can over here has 250 milligrams per half cup. So the reason that our sodium one here, this one still has 15 milligrams, we know that that's naturally occurring in those beets because no salt was added during the processing. Whereas this one, 250 milligrams, we can say 15 of those milligrams were naturally occurring in there, and the rest were added during the processing. So best idea, I think, when we're looking for like canned vegetables, like I was saying, they're just as healthy as us, or for us, as like our frozen or our fresh vegetables, and a lot of times they're a lot cheaper. So, and just good to have on hand for quick, easy meals, right? But just trying to pick those no salt added versions is probably the best bet when it comes to those.
Yeah. Could we go to the baking aisle, and you could show us some of the low sodium flavors that you might add?
Oh yeah, I think those are those on the end, or no, those are spices. Yeah.
Yes, in the spice aisle. Yep. I know you recommend those a lot to your patients.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, especially when we're trying to cut down on that sodium and stuff. Seasoning things ourselves is a good way to do that. All right, let's find so here's one that most of you have probably heard of: salt-free Mrs. Dash flavoring. That's one version of them, but they come in a lot of different ones. Those are always a good option to season, vegetables, meat, potatoes, anything really with. But they have tons of different ones. And you'll see up here, like this McCormick brand, they also have salt-free versions. I think those probably are, the best if you want something that's pre-mixed. Otherwise, I mean, you can make up your own, say you're making tacos, instead of using like a pre-bought taco seasoning mix, right? So for this, 2 teaspoons is going to be 460 milligrams of sodium, right? So instead of using like one of these, maybe looking up like online a mix of a taco seasoning mix that you can make with your own spices and mixing that up yourself, so you're not getting all that extra salt in there. Same idea for chili or fajitas, those type of things.
Can you speak a little just more about salt? I mean, I know a lot of people are, you know, put on a low sodium diet as they get older, but why is a low sodium diet good just overall in general for everybody?
So obviously your body needs some sodium. I think one of the key factors too is we often use salt and sodium interchangeably, like they're the same thing, but they're not. So sodium is a mineral, right? Sodium and chloride, or sodium is the mineral. And then our table salt is made up of sodium and chloride. So it's made up of those 2 minerals. So it's 40% sodium, 60% chloride, right? So when they say kick the salt shaker, that's why they're saying that, is because, again, 1 teaspoon of table salt has 2,300 milligrams of sodium in it, which is why, you know, so majority of our processed and our prepackaged foods have a lot of extra added salt in them, which boosts that sodium level up. So that's why we say try to stay away from those. You know, people like with CHF tell them to go on like a fluid restriction or a low sodium diet for basically for that reason, because the more sodium we have, the more we're going to retain water. And in cases like CHF or heart failure, we don't want to retain water, because then that builds up around our heart and our organs and makes it harder for us to breathe and that type of thing. So you do need some salt or some sodium in your diet, but most Americans, because we eat so much processed food, we already get like enough of that sodium, or even sometimes too much, right? So that's the main reason, I guess.
Yep. And then one more question about what's your opinion of garlic powder?
Garlic powder. Let's look at one. Oh, this one's organic, but I don't think it matters. Yeah, I mean, I think garlic powder's fine.
Yeah.
You know, like if it's just the plain garlic powder, then, you know, that's literally all it is
Right.
garlic.
Maybe a good substitution from garlic salt that has the added sodium.
Definitely. Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Karen had a question about just the Fit for You weight management program.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about that program? Just a very brief overview. And then I believe there's a class starting soon. Okay.
Yep. So our Fit for You weight management program, it's taught by me, the dietitian, and then we have Travis, who's our health coach. So I teach most of the classes, and then Travis's role is he kind of follows up with everyone weekly through like either phone or email or whatever you prefer, really.
And it's an 8-week program?
Yes, 8-week program. And we meet once a week on Tuesdays from 4 to 5.
Virtually.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it has to be virtual these days. But we meet virtually. And each week is kind of just a different nutrition topic. So we'll talk about reading food labels. We'll talk about exercise, you know, different things like that. But before the program starts, you'll have like a one-on-one assessment with me. And basically what we do at that is just get your starting metrics. So we'll do your height, your weight, your blood pressure, your body fat percentage, waist circumference, those types of things. We'll have the 8 weeks of the courses, and then we'll do a post assessment at the end to see if anything has changed, right? So that's kind of the gist of it. And like you were saying, we have our next class is starting up on February 2nd. So if anyone's interested, we can definitely get you the information, and then you just have to call the number on there to register and
get started with the first assessment.
Yep. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let me check to see if there's any more. All right. Well, I think that that will conclude, unless we have any other last minute questions that you might want Baily while we have her here. Otherwise, I can send out to the group the information on the Fit for You. If you guys have people that you would want to forward that information on to, it's completely free program. It's in conjunction with the health department and other community agencies. So, you know, our goal at Spectrum Health is to help, you know, improve health. And Baily is definitely part of the community health team, along with the health department and other ones that are really striving to make people healthier and live happier lives. So let me check the chat one more time. It just says, thank you for doing this. They learned something. That good. You learned something.
That's what I like to hear.
All right.
Well, thank you,
Well, if you guys don't
Danielle.
have
And
anything else, enjoy the rest of the day.
thank you, Danielle. Thank you,
Tell everybody to
Baily.
enjoy the inauguration.
All right. It's
All right,
it's always
we'll
good.
talk later. Enjoy the.
It's always
All
good to
right.
hear and be reminded.
Have a good day, you guys.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye
Oh
bye.
yeah, for sure.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Jody.
Okay.
Yeah. No, thank you, Karen. And we'll
Yeah.
have to make sure we get the recording so we can share it.
Okay.
Jody, we had one extra guest here in my office watching too, if you want to put that person down as a spectator as well.
Got a name for me?